Head over to miniaturemarket.com where they have thousands of board games at discounted prices like Paladins of the West Kingdom. Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today we're going back in time and we're going to be trying to get some help from the Paladins. We're going to be putting fortification up to defend ourselves. We're going to be sending outsiders or converting them or attacking them. We're also going to be recruiting different townsfolk and trying to follow the king's orders. Today we're talking about Paladins of the West Kingdom. It's a standalone game, sort of the next in the series and line of games. The previous one was the Architects of the West Kingdom. So let me show you how the game's played. I'll see you on the other side. Paladins of the West Kingdom is a worker placement game to 1 to 4 players, where each round you'll be helped by one of these paladins that will give you some new workers and some attributes like influence, strength, and faith. The object of the game is to have the most points at the end, and you'll get points in a multitude of ways, like moving your different attribute markers up the track. You'll be getting points. Points are denoted by these yellow flags as you see here. You'll also get points by placing a certain amount of your workshops. Similarly, by placing a certain amount of monks, outposts, jars, by fortifying a certain amount of walls, and by converting different outsiders, and by completing king's orders, but we'll talk about all these different ways as the game goes on. The game is played over 7 rounds. Each round has 7 phases that you'll go through. For example, in round 1, you'll flip this king order card. Round 2, you'll do this one. Round 3, you'll flip both of those. Now these 3 are the order cards, and they'll get you a certain amount of points at the end of the game if you've fulfilled their conditions. We'll go more over these later. Next, each player is going to draw the top 3 cards from their paladin deck. So each player will secretly be able to look at the 3 cards that they've drawn. From those 3 cards, they're going to select one that they're going to use this round, and they'll place it face down right on this spot there. The other 2, one of them, they will place on the top of their deck, meaning they'll see it next round. The other they'll place on the bottom of their deck. Then, starting with the start player and going clockwise, each player will reveal the paladin card they've selected this round. They'll also collect the 2 workers in the top left. In this case, we have a scout and a laborer. Then that player will select one of these tavern cards, and they'll collect the 4 workers that are shown there. Like in this case, we would take 2 red, a purple, and a blue. Now you'd either turn this sideways 90 degrees or flip it over, showing that other players cannot take this. Now anytime you get a purple worker, these are criminals. For each one of those that you take, you must take one of these purple suspicion cards. You'll flip it over, you'll place it to the right side of your player board and keep it there, but you'll get this much silver, either there's 0, 1, or 2. In this case it's 2. And you'll take it from the tax supply. Notice that this card, the silver is sort of reddish, like here. So you'll take it from here. So in this case, I'll take 2 from the tax supply. We'll talk a little bit later what happens when this runs out. Now those purple criminals are cool because they actually act as a wild worker. You can use them on any spot that we'll show you later. And so that player now has their worker pool for this round. It would then go to the next player clockwise, and all players would do this. Once all players have done that, we then go to the action phase, where everyone is going to be at one at a time, taking a single action, placing 1 or more workers, as I'm about to show you what all these different actions do. Now this is my worker pool here for this round, and essentially on your turn, you're going to either place a worker or workers, or pass. This will continue till all players have passed. Now this is my worker pool, but I'm going to use other workers to just kind of show you what all the other actions are that you can take. So let's go over some of the more straightforward actions on the left side of the player board. The first one is develop. You have to place 2 workers, and if it's clear like this, you can use workers of any type. So I can maybe put one here, and I can maybe put one like this. Now in this case, we also have to pay 4 silver. Now normally that action costs 4 silver, but my paladin that I selected this round says developing costs 2 fewer silver. So instead of paying 4, I only have to pay 2, which I do have because we started with 3. Cool way to use the paladin in the first round. And you can place one of your workshops on the right side of your player board. Now you see, when I uncover this, it also gives me a worker. So I will take another cleric and place it in my supply immediately. Now if you look at the right side of your player board, the 2 left spots of each of these have a dotted box outline. That means you can place that workshop on any one of these, because normally, like this one, would cost us 3 different workers, 1 of any type, 1 scout, and 1 cleric. Now here, we could place it, let's say, here or here, and this means when we take this action later, we don't have to place a worker here, it's already taken, we just have to place in those 2 spots. By the way, if there was already a worker here, for example, or workers, like maybe we had taken this action a little bit earlier, and you wanted to place that workshop there, you can place it here, you just take the worker that's underneath it and place it back in the supply. Now keep in mind, you're only taking 1 action, and it's the next player's turn. So after we did this develop, it'd be the next player's turn, but I'm just gonna run through all the actions. The hunt and trade works similarly. If you want, you can place 1 worker of any type, either here or here, and get what it shows you, a provision or a silver from the supply, and place it there. However, you can place 2 workers, in this case, any kind, or a green one, or any kind and a blue one. Now, if you did that, you would get 1, 2, 3 silver, or 1, 2, 3 provisions. Now, if you place a single worker on this turn, on a future turn, you cannot place another worker here. You either have to put 1 or both, the first time you go to either hunt or trade. Now, when you recruit, you can send 1 or 2 workers. If you send 1, you have to place it in the left spot. If you place 2, you use any worker here and a red fighter there. You can't place 1 worker here in 1 turn and then in a subsequent turn in the same round, then go here. It's either 1 or 2 the first time you go recruit. Now, if you go just here with a worker of any kind, you can essentially go and discard 1 of the green townsfolk, and because the icon that we just had the worker on looked just like that. So you can discard any one of these. However, you will have to possibly pay some silver. Like this one, we'd have to pay 2 silver to discard it, and if so, we would discard this card and get these 2 workers, for example. And when you discard them, essentially you're sending them off on a quest. If the first time this round you placed any worker here and a red worker here, you can then recruit. Now let's say the lineup looked like this and we did place both workers. As we said before, we could spend 2 silver to discard, send them off on a quest, and get these 2 workers. And let's say we wanted to recruit this one. When you recruit, you pay, in this case, either 2 silver or a debt card, which we'll talk about in just a moment, and you'll place this alongside your player board. And basically what these mean is when you do this, you get this for the rest of the game. So anytime I place a workshop, like we've already seen, you'll get this type of worker, a laborer in this case. Now when you take a debt, you'll take the unpaid debt here and you'll put it in front of you. If you don't pay this at the end of the game, it will be worth -3 points. There's different ways that you can actually pay the debts. We'll go over some of those later, but when you pay a debt, you'd flip it over to this side, it's paid, and it's gonna be worth +1 point at the end of the game. Now let's go over the prey action. Now this typically would require a cleric worker that would match that like this, and you'd have to pay 2 silver. However, I just want to remind you and reiterate that the purple workers are criminals and you had to take suspicion for them, but the good side is they are wild and you can place them anywhere just like that. So here, we put this here, the 2 silver, and we can remove any workers from any spot. So for example, we can remove these. Now they would go back to the supply, not to us, the general supply. This just opens up the spot so we can go here again this round. And speaking of those purple workers again, you could conspire, put worker of any type here to gain a purple criminal worker. Again, anytime you take a criminal worker, you must gain suspicion by pulling the card as we showed earlier. Now we're going to go over all the actions on the right side of the player board, and now's a good time to remind you that on your turn, you're simply putting worker or workers to one spot, then it's the next player's turn clockwise, and you continue doing this until all players have passed. So let's first talk about commission. Well, we have a workshop here. Normally this would take a green worker, a worker of any type, and then a cleric here, but we have this workshop here, so it's any worker and a cleric. And if we go there, we get to commission a monk. Now for all of these on the right side, you'll see a color on the left side and a color of the right side. These are either black, blue, or red. And those have to do with the 3 attributes. Remember, red is strength, black is faith, and blue is influence. And depending on where each of those markers are on this track, it tells you how much you have of that. Right now we have 0 of each of them, but if we had this, we essentially would have 4 influence, and that's how these trackers work. And that's important because what this means is on the left side, it's what is basically a requirement, and the right side is what you're going to gain. So in order to do a commission, you're going to need a certain amount of faith to do this action, but you're going to gain influence. Here you're going to need influence to do this, but you're going to gain attack, and so on and so forth. So for this one here, we're going to take a monk. Now, when you take monks up here, you have to take them from left to right, and you're going to have to provision it. So the first 3 are only going to cost you 1, the second 2 are going to cost you 2 provisions, and the last 2 are going to cost you 3. And as you go up and you place these over the different turns, if you end up getting to the end, those are worth points at the end of the game, depending on how far you went. So we're going to do this. Again, we're going to need some faith, but we're going to provision this by placing the workers needed and paying the provision from our supply to the general supply. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Now, when you commission a monk, you can place it on one of the open spots, and you're going to need a certain amount of faith. Like these spots, you don't need any. If you want to go in one of these spots, you need 2 faith, 4 faith for these, and 6, and so on and so forth. And again, that's where your black faith flag is on your attribute chart on the left side of your player board. So here, I don't need any faith to go here. That's cool. Now, some spots you can only go to at certain player counts. Here at 3 or more, here at 4 or more, and they do different things. Like, hey, gain a laborer worker, gain 2 silver, remove a suspicion card, recruit one of the green townsfolk cards for free. Let's go here. We're going to get rid of a suspicion. Now, since we took that commission action, we're going to get this as a reward. And as you can see, we go up 1 on the influence attribute. So now we moved up that attribute to 1. Now, the next one is fortify. Again, you need to place all those workers. And you're going to need a certain amount of influence, and you're going to get strength. Now, you're going to be building the wall from left to right over here. And remember, you need influence. In this case, we don't need any. Well, we have 1, so that's good. Now, if you're ever short on a specific attribute, the Paladin that you've selected this round has attributes of certain types. So this one has 2 influence and 2 strength. So even if we needed some influence and we didn't have quite enough here, you always add to it this round for what your Paladin supplies. So we always have at least 2 plus whatever we have here. So to fortify, this is the logo of the spot that we went to. So you'll take the top one off the deck here. You'll place it in the leftmost open spot. You can't do them in any order. Again, you have to have 0 influence, which we do, and you have to pay 1 provision. And as you get the walls go further and further, you'll have to spend more provision and things like this. This will have us go up 1 on the strength attribute. The red flag will go up 1 on your attribute track, and this will be worth 2 points at the end of the game. And again, anytime you update those attributes, you're going to be moving them on this track. Now, going to the garrison spot, again, you're going to need these 3 workers, and then you're going to need a certain amount of strength, but you're going to gain faith. And when you do this, you're going to take the outpost that's just above these, and you're going to gain 1 attribute of faith that you'll move up on that track. And again, as you place these, when you get further and further, you can get points at the end of the game. And when you place them on the main board, again, and before when we commissioned the monks, you'd be looking at faith, but now we're putting the outposts there. We look at the red, which is the strength. Now, we had 1 strength, and our Paladin gave us 2. So we could actually go to this 3 spot here. Again, making sure you're playing with the right player counts to go to one of these spots, but you could just do what those spots say. In this case, like here, gain 2 silver, for example. Then when you take the absolve action, you'll need to, again, place these 3 workers, and you're going to need a certain amount of influence, but you're going to gain faith. And so here, you'll also have to pay silver. For this one, we don't need any influence, 0, but we have to pay a silver. We place this over here into any of these spots and gain the reward. Maybe get a laborer. Now, we talked about debts earlier in the game, and there's different ways to pay debts. There's lots of these spaces on the main board in here that when you go there, it allows you to flip a debt card to paid. So if you do that, if this was in front of you, you could then flip it, and that's going to go from -3 points to 1 point at the end of the game. Now, when placing these jars, you have to place them in a spot that does not already have a jar, and you're going to need a certain amount of influence. So this one needs at least 1, this one needs at least 3, and of course it gets more expensive, 2 silvers for getting these 3. Now, you're also going to get 1 faith for doing that, so you're going to move that up the attribute track as well. Now, if you want to take the attack action, again, you're going to have to place these 3 workers, and you're going to need strength, but you're going to gain influence. Now, we'll talk about this in just a moment, but you're going to be able to spend silver for moving up strength to attack. This is sort of an optional thing. We'll talk about that now. Now, when attacking, you're looking at the outsiders, which are at the bottom of the right main board, and you're looking at the amount of strength. You need this much strength. Remember, it's your strength attribute on the left side of your player board, plus any possible strength your Paladin might bring you this round. Now, if you don't have enough strength to attack a certain card, you can pay 1 silver to get 2 strength. Essentially, if we could only afford this much strength to defeat this card, and when you're attacking, you're only looking at the upper right here. We would say we have 1. If you want to get this one, you can spend a silver to get 1 card to the right, which essentially is 2 strength. If we only had 1, but we wanted to get to this card, we have to pay 1, 2 silver, like that. If we wanted to get this one, but we only had 1, we'd go 1, 2, 3 silver. So that's a quick way of calculating that. You'd spend that to the supply. And then for the one that you attack, it just tells you on the right, all of the attacks are going to gain you influence. So 1 influence and then some other rewards. Now, when you attack these, again, you'll get 1 influence, you'll get a specific reward, and you'll take this card and you'll place it face down alongside your own player board. This will be worth certain things at the end of the game. And the last one is convert that we'll talk about. Again, you need these 3 workers. You're going to need a certain amount of faith, and you're going to gain strength. Now, when you convert outsiders, you're going to be placing them on the bottom of your player board. The first one, you don't have to pay any silver. The second one, you'll have to pay 1 silver, 2 silver, 2 silver, and so on and so forth as you convert more and more outsiders over the course of the game. And since converting, you're going to need the faith, and you're going to need a certain amount of faith attributes depending on which card you're trying to convert. Let's just say we did this one. You would take this card. You're only concerned with the bottom when you convert, and you'll place it underneath your player board. Again, this one costs you nothing. The next one will cost you 1 silver in addition. And this is going to give you points for specific things at the end of the game. For example, if we had attacked this one earlier that we were talking about attacking, we had placed it face down. Remember, it has this icon on it. This says at the end of the game, you're going to get 1 point for every one of these types of outsiders that I attacked. So this is going to be worth a point for me. So I'm going to try to start attacking more of those throughout the game. Now, earlier we talked about the tax area, and when we took a suspicion card after getting a criminal, we got a certain amount of silver. Now remember, anytime in the game where you see you're taking silver that has red like this, you take it from this tax area. Now let's say we had to take this. There's only 1 here. We would take this one. We would take the second one from the normal supply, but anytime this gets emptied, remember the suspicion card would go in front of that player, then the player or players that have the most suspicion cards would have to get an unpaid debt. Again, we talked about how these work earlier, but they take one of those. But they also get to get rid of half of their suspicion cards rounded down, and they would put them in this discarded spot. And you basically take the most recent ones that are on the top of your pile and put them here, again, half rounded down. Now also keep in mind that there's some townsfolk cards that will trigger when inquisitions happen. That's the icon that is shown here. Like in this case, if you have this townsfolk that you've recruited earlier, when an inquisition happens, you get to get rid of another suspicion card of yours. And after that's finished, you'd then refill this tax area with a certain amount of coins depending on the amount of players, just like you did at the beginning of the game. And rounds continue like this until the end of the 7th round, then you go to final scoring. And in final scoring, players might be getting points for completing the different king's orders, like having 5 or more walls placed on their player board, or commissioning 5 or more monks out to the main board, or placing 5 or more jars on their player board. You'll be getting points where you are on the attribute track for the 3 different attributes, like 16 points for this influence, 9 points for the faith, and 3 points for the strength. And then you'll get points if you've gone up these different tracks and placed a certain amount of those in order to get points. Like in this case, we've unlocked all the way to here, we'd get a point. Here we've unlocked, here we get 2 points, but we didn't unlock enough in either of those 2 tracks. Sometimes by fortifying walls we get points, so here we have a total of 3. Here we'd look at our converts and see we get points for having attacked certain types. Like in this case, we get 1 point for each of these. So in this case, we just get 1 point for that. You'd also get -3 points for any unpaid debt or +1 point for paid debts. And for each set of 3 in combination of provisions and silvers, you'll also get 1 point. So in this case, for these 3, we have 1 point. At that point, whoever has the most points is the winner. If it's tied, whoever got the most points from these king's orders is the winner. And if it's tied, the player with the least suspicion is the winner. And if still tied, then all tied players share the victory. All right, Paladins, love the artwork here. I love this style. It was brought to us, through some of the other games like Architects. It keeps that consistent art style, and it's really pretty to look at. This box is small for what comes in it. Oh my gosh, the box heavy, has a box full of components, tons of wooden bits that fit in this relatively small box based upon what's going on there. So you're getting a lot of stuff in this box. My favorite part about this, and what really I think sets this game aside the most, is picking your paladin each round. Such a cool thing where you draw 3 cards, you're gonna play 1 this round, you're gonna have 1 to look at possibly next round, and 1 you're gonna send to the bottom of the deck. And it really allows you to be like, okay, what am I gonna do this round, and what am I gonna be thinking about doing next round based upon the paladin I put down. Now you might not end up using that paladin next round, but to know it's there, to start building strategy around in advance, That's my favorite part of this game. I like the King's orders. Every game is going to be 3 different ones. They come out in different orders and it changes your strategy. Sometimes you try to pivot and get the one that's the most points. The interconnected tracks here is very interesting. You've got, on the whole right side of that player board, you've got, hey, if I do this, I need influence, but then I'm going to get strength. On this one, I need strength, but I'm going to get faith. And they're all sort of interconnected in different ways. You got to, work your way up different tracks and get things to get other things. And I liked how they're all interconnected in that way. There's definitely lots of options for points, whether you're going to be fortifying or attacking outsiders and then, converting those outsiders that will give you points, or moving up those attribute tracks. Or completing the tracks of the different boards and monks and things on your own board. There's just sort of a point salad, if you will, but there's definitely a lot of different avenues that you can go with. On the negative side, this felt sort of less thematic than I'd say Architects. I liked Architects better than this. It was a little bit more streamlined, it was faster, it was more thematic, like, hey, you know what, you're doing a lot of weird things over there, a lot of people, well, we're gonna send them to jail, stuff like that. This one was more of a sort of straight ahead, sort of heavier Euro game. I'd call it medium heavy. It wasn't like super heavy, but there's definitely a lot going on in it. This one to me felt more like work than it did, say, the Architects. It was just more of a, if you're looking for that crunchy, medium heavy Euro, I think this is gonna be up your alley. But it wasn't necessarily for my taste. And for a heavier Euro that takes, 2 hours to play, that has a lot of setup time, for me, it didn't sort of stand out enough from other heavier Euros like, Manhattan Project Minutes to Midnight, which is pretty heavy, Lisboa, things like that. That's probably even heavier than this. But this one I don't think it did enough to really stand on its own, but there's gonna be plenty of people that like those heavier Euros, that like this series, that this is gonna be their favorite game of the series. I've talked to a few people that this is the case for them. It just wasn't for me. So if you're looking for that heavier Euro experience with moving up and down tracks and having things interconnected, I think you're gonna like this one. If you like sort of shorter, more streamlined games, I think you'll like Architects better. Did you miss the Game Topper 2.0 Kickstarter? Have no fear, it's not too late to get in on the ultimate gaming accessory. Convert your table into a high-quality gaming table with a fully portable Game Topper system and take advantage of some of the best 3mm premium gaming mats in the industry. New styles, new sizes, and new accessories can be yours. Upgrade every game you play by late backing now at GameToppersLLC.com.